by Teese Snyder. Chapter 37, Separate Ways. Derek Riggs, Upstate Massachusetts, 2004. When I finally regained consciousness, one of my eyes wouldn't open, and the other was blurred by a trickle of blood coming out of my head. I lay face down in the dirt, muddied leaves sucking up against my lips as I struggled to breathe. Then, as my restricted vision slowly returned to me, I noticed a pair of feet trudge past, a hand holding a pistol, the hilt of which was covered in blood, and Matthew's heartbroken and tearful expression. I remembered now. I remembered what he had done, what his brother had done with Matthew's girlfriend, Anna, and what I had done to try and stop him. I listened to his whining sobs as he pulled his brother's bike from behind the tarp and tossed a knapsack of supplies over his shoulder. I glanced to the side to where his brother had been shot, only to see that there was no longer anyone there. Sebastian was gone, or he had been moved. However, as I watched Matthew tuck the bloodied pistol into the knapsack, I didn't dare move. I didn't dare try to speak to him or ask for help. My friend was gone. Our friendship was dead. And if I survived my injuries, at least I had finally learned a lesson so cruel that I had foolishly ignored it the first time I should have realized the truth. Never trust anyone. Matthew pulled the tires of his bike along the ground and then took a moment to wipe away his tears. But he never stopped sobbing. I twitched my head to the side to try and see more of my surroundings, looking for any sign of his brother, but still saw nothing. Where had he gone? What had Matthew done with him? Why couldn't I hear Anna crying anymore? Was she still alive? Were either of them still alive? Or did Matthew, in his sick fit of rage, simply drag them into the woods and execute them? I had no way of knowing, and until he left, I didn't dare try to get up and look. I turned my attention back to him sitting on the bike, only to see that he had noticed my one eye was barely open. He stared at me without rage or hurt in his eyes, without the unbridled hatred that he had just moments before unleashed upon us all. Instead, all I could see was sorrow, deep, unrelenting sorrow. His lip quivered as he cried, sucking in a trembling breath to say his last words to me. "I'm sorry, Derek. I'm sorry," he said, lowering his head in shame and riding his bicycle into the forest, disappearing from view, running from what he'd done, and for all he cared, leaving me to die. I stayed on the ground for a moment after he disappeared, halfway between disbelief and sadness to see him go. I knew he would never come back, and likely would never be heard from again. The only thing I didn't know was whether or not I would have to take the precaution of hiding the bodies of his brother and former girlfriend, no doubt located somewhere near the fort. I spread a bloodied hand into the mud under me and slowly pushed myself up, feeling a shooting pain in my ribs accompanying the throbbing pain of my still bleeding head. I hobbled over to the branches concealing the entranceway to the fort. The tarp had been torn down, and I could identify two motionless figures lying on the ground inside. Then, with great pain, I crouched down and slid my way inside. Sebastian lay on his back. His knee and bicep were mangled from the 2 shots Matthew had fired into him. But since I had been conscious, since I had last been conscious, his wounds had multiplied. Matthew hadn't executed him as I suspected he might. Instead, he'd beaten him mercilessly and then left him to bleed to death. His face was so swollen and bruised that he was barely recognizable. His cheekbones were pulverized. His eyes were sealed shut. Shards of his broken teeth scattered the ground around him. And if it weren't for the faintest of breaths causing his blood-soaked torso to rise and fall, I would have been sure he was dead. Jesus fucking Christ. Anna lay beside him in a similar condition, although at least he had shown her some small semblance of mercy. Her once delicate and beautiful features were now bruised, her nose bent to the side like a cinder block had fallen on it. A deep cut ran the length of her hair, and a small knife lay beside her hand. One of the knives we had kept inside of the fort. She had no doubt attempted to fight back, leaving Matthew no choice but to knock her unconscious. And as I stood, staring in shock and disgust at the two of them, I couldn't help but sputter nauseated breaths in between horrified tears. I had to do something. Sebastian was going to die if I left him this way, and well, if he had been killed, I might have considered hiding his body to safeguard the fort as it was. I couldn't help but feel that part of my life was over. The only thing that I had ever cared about was gone now. And the people I had been foolish enough to trust with its care had been the ones who'd taken it from me. I hobbled over to Sebastian and grabbed hold of his shoulders, taking a few deep breaths to prepare myself before I endured the strain and struggle of dragging him to safety. I then pushed Anna onto her side to make room to move Sebastian and also to try and wake her. However, despite my best efforts to snap her back to reality, she remained unconscious, leaving me no choice but to haul them both outside. And as soon as I had cleared them from the fort, I would make an emergency call using Sebastian's cell phone. And I would tell them where we were. I would lead them to the fort. However, what I wouldn't do was leave any trace that anything had ever been there. Once I had cleared Sebastian and Anna from the fort, I would use the very supplies I had previously coveted to destroy it, and everything inside of it once and for all. I had at least 2 cracked ribs, and dragging Sebastian's nearly 200-pound frame out of the convoluted mess of branches blocking the entranceway to the fort forced me to stop from time to time, vomit, wipe away the sweat, and press forward. Anna was far easier, lighter, and smaller. And while I had held her in my arms, feeling her faint breaths against my chest and drying blood stick against my shirt, I made sure to treat her with the same care and consideration that I did Sebastian. Because even though I would have thought I might have had it in me to kill both of them for what they'd done, in that moment, in that wretched fucking moment, all I felt was sorrow and regret. I pulled their bodies away from the entranceway until they were clear of the blast radius. Then, after digging through Sebastian's pockets, I removed his phone, dialed 911, and gave the operator specific instructions of where to send help and how to find us, ensuring whoever came looking wouldn't get lost by readying a flare gun and multiple colored smoke grenades. When I re-entered the fort, I felt the full force of what had happened weigh on my conscience. I hated them for what they'd done. I hated all of them. I hated that it was my obligation to save them, that it was my burden to uphold the lie of what had happened to us. And most of all, I hated that in that moment, I was completely vulnerable. I had nothing. I was nothing. They had taken it all away. And to add insult to injury, Now I would be the one who had to destroy the evidence. I removed the lid from the crate of our manufactured explosive ordnance, sliding each and every piece of explosives we had under the support columns of the cave. Grenades, dynamite, and pitiful triple-layer water balloons full of viscous plastic explosive and electric kitchen timers were crammed into every nook of the fort, in between the crates of food and ammunition, in between the books on how to survive, the weapon cache, the medical supplies, everywhere. Then, once I had rigged it to explode, I lay a long fuse leading to the sticks of dynamite out front of the entranceway. However, when it came time to finally leave, to turn my back on everything I loved and watch it burn, a part of me wished I could stay. Part of me wished I could make sure Sebastian and Anna would be okay, without sitting by their sides and ensuring they got the help they needed. I wanted to die. I wanted to blow myself to hell with everything else that mattered to me and leave this fucked up world before the masses of brainless ghouls flooded the streets of our cities, before the mindless, wretched filth of this planet spread the disease and wiped hard-working, iron-strong, decent people like me from the planet. All because they were too fucking cowardly and stupid to prepare for what they should have seen right in front of them. Instead, leaving me on my own again, and again, and again. Fuck them. Fuck all of them. I would never trust another. I would never trust anybody ever again. So help me, you fucking cunt god. I had learned my lesson. I was alone, and I would never be anything but alone. And then, as I lit the fuse leading to the dynamite and took a seat by Sebastian and Anna's sides, I watched with my one bitter and heartbroken eye as the explosion collapsed the fort, sending millions of chunks of dirt flying across everything around it, sending out a shockwave as big as if a building had just collapsed in on itself. My past was gone. Nothing but rubble now. And as I sat there, watching the smoke and dust clear, I pondered what my new solo plan for survival in this cruel world might be.